Hi, I'm Liam Bell. I'm the gamekeeper on the Military Open Estate in the Corvedale in South Shropshire, and I'm just going to talk you through our 6 metre margins, which are pollen and nectar mixes in essence, and their habitat we're planting to increase the insect count, predominantly as part of our grey partridge reintroduction project. The first of the strips, which I'm going to show you, which is this one, which is one of our 6 metre margins, we established following the harvest this year, and it was down as winter rape. Very simple process. We waited till the crop was off. We then topped the larger of the stalks, let the shed seeds germinate. Once they were up a couple of inches, we sprayed with glyphosate, just to reduce them, and then direct drilled into the stubble. Very shallow, direct drilled into stubble, left it a couple of days, and then we rolled it in. And this is the result. May not look much now, but every plant we need is in here, and it's all starting to come. This is another one of our strips. It's also planted this year. Different to the first strip we looked at, which was following on from a sort of a crop. This we established in spring. Previously it had been sort of a grass margin. Got a few of these where they've been a 6 metre margin, or they've been a sort of a 10-year-old pollen and nectar mix, and they've just come to the end of their life. Establishing these is a lot harder, but it's very important to do the groundwork if you want your wildflowers and your grasses, the beneficial grasses, to come up afterwards. If you just sort of skip over it and chuck the seeds in our experience, nothing's going to happen. You need to really sort of almost farm your strips as much as the crop next door, but only for the first 12 months. After that, they become established, and general year-on-year management becomes a lot easier. What we did with these, we had to sort of top them down to nothing, down to a base. We then used Roundup, sprayed them out, left it over the winter months. Following spring we had a look, saw what else was starting to come. A lot of nettle, a lot of docks, lots of thistles, some scutch grass, some sterile brome, stuff you don't want in the strips that is no good for the insects, which will outcompete all the other plants and the flowers you're trying to get established. We sprayed it again, we left it for 3 weeks, we cultivated, we left it to see what had happened. We still had bramble coming up, we still had some stuff we didn't want. Sprayed it off again, then we worked it, had a look. By this time we'd sort of got to May time, maybe even beginning of June. We worked it, we were happy with what we had. There were none of the big invasive weeds there, although obviously we're going to get small broadleaf weeds. We then drilled it. Drill depth is so important, it's so important. If you go too deep, I mean, we were sort of just tickling the surface with these things. Go too deep and half of the plants won't come, and then you lose the variety. A good example of the topping process, I'll just show you now on these plants on the floor. Here we've got some good varieties. We've got reed canary grass, which we like. Here we've got some teasel, looking fairly innocuous and small at the moment, but that'll be next year. It'll be 5-6 foot tall. Next we've got some oxeye daisies, which again are sort of dormant, but they are there and they'll grow up. Got some chicory, which will get 5 or 6 foot tall. Blue flowers. We've got flowers and plants at different heights. When it gets to this height, we'll top it. We're not going to top it again this year because it's too high, it's too wet. It's sort of now November. But all these will be topped off. They'll be taken down to a couple of inches, taking the tops off, stops them seeding, stops them developing, gets rid of them. It stimulates the growth. The chicory will stay like this, and all the beneficial stuff, everything we wanted, will keep growing because it's not overshaded by the bad plants. The management of the more established strips is very straightforward. What we do, we top. Now, these strips are not generally under stewardship. They're not prescriptive. If they're under stewardship and mid-tier, they can be used for mid-tier, these strips. They can be put against greening. They qualify as floristically enhanced field margins for mid-tier stewardship applications. What we do with these, you can top, and it's very important to have different structures, tall stuff, short stuff. If you top, and we've topped this area just in a bit of a zigzag, although you can notice that against the hedge. It's been sort of squashed by the tractors when they've been hedge cutting. But again, the management of the hedge is important. It's key as well. You can't just manage the strip if you don't manage the hedge. You don't want the hedge coming out and encroaching on the strip. And for farmland birds like the yellowhammer, who prefer a hedge no taller than 2 metres high, because they don't trust taller hedges, the management of the hedge is equally important. You can put it into rotation. I wouldn't recommend cutting it every year. Every 2 years, every 3 years maybe. Just cut it back, keep it at a good height. But the strips themselves, if you notice, we've got about 18 inches against a crop that's tall, that'll always be left tall. And that's sort of like a green fence to stop any possible drift from liquid fertilisers, to stop granular fertilisers making it into the strips. You don't want the strips to be enriched by nitrogens and fertilisers, other fertilisers. You end up with the wrong plants, you end up with nettles, you end up with docks, you end up with too much grass, you don't get enough wildflowers. So you need that 18 inches to act as the green fence, just to help trap any drift. Sprayed on the right day, there won't be drift, but you can never always get the exact right day to spray your main crops. It has to be a balance. The other pieces inside, some's tall, some short. You want this variety. It looks a bit untidy at the moment. It's because we've cut the hedge and everything's falling down. But in amongst, you can see these tussocky areas starting to form in the grasses on the floor, and that's where the insects will hibernate, and those are the areas where the insects will appear from next spring. What are the benefits of the strips? Lots of benefits of strip. For us particularly, we want to increase the general biodiversity on the whole estate. We want to specifically increase the index, the chick food index. We want more insects available for things like partridge chicks and farmland birds to feed on. As well as the increase in insects, we've had an increase in seed-eating farmland birds, picking on, goldfinches and finches. They just love the seeds inside these teasels. We've had an increase in small mammals. We've got more hedgehogs, we've got more mice, we've got more voles. The increase in the mice and voles, we've now got more kestrels, we've got more barn owls, we've got more tawny owls, we've got more things hunting the strips. They're good wildlife corridors, they connect areas together, and the place just generally feels warmer, more wildlife friendly and more loved.